Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest is one of the most impressive entrepreneurs and operators I've ever met. Over the course of his career, he's been involved with almost 100 businesses and organizations as a board member, advisor, investor, and operator. He's been a driving force behind putting the Utah tech scene on the map. As chairman and CEO of his last company, Simplus, he grew the business to over $650 million in revenue. That business was acquired by Infosys. His current company is an AI-enabled, no-code RevOps platform that empowers go-to-market teams to do capacity planning, territory and quota management, routing, performance to plan tracking, and a lot more. Please welcome Chairman and CEO at Fullcast, Ryan Westwood. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited for this. You and I have been talking a lot. I'm excited to get your knowledge into everyone's head. So we're going to jump right into it. First question: what's the one thing you've done at Fullcast, big or small, that's had the biggest impact, and you'll absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future?
Okay, so this is really fresh for me because we have 2 quarters completed at Fullcast, and what we've done is dive in deep into the persona of our customer in the ICP. So not just saying, okay, this is the type of customer, this is who we're selling to, but really deeply understanding them. So let me give you some examples. Let's see, I've talked to more than 60 VPs of RevOps in these 2 quarters. Here's a few things I learned. They're very responsive between about 10 and midnight. They're the hardest working people. They're unsung heroes. You think about when you hit the revenue mark, the CRO usually sees credit. When you are efficient and you're a machine and you hit the EBITDA mark, the CFO usually gets credit. But the RevOps leader is the one that's putting together the strategy where the rubber meets the road from the board and the CEO, but they're really unsung heroes. So they don't get a lot of credit for all the production they create within an organization and efficiencies. The other thing that's interesting is it's still new enough that there's a lot of debate about who they should report to. So I started surveying and asking them, who do you report to? Well, about half of them are to the CRO. And then you have about 15% to 20% to the COO. And you have 15 to 20% to the CFO. And then you have this emergence of the chief commercial officer. So where they report, the scope of the departments they touch is changing too. From, are they just influencing ops from sales, marketing? Are they involved with product, customer success? So there's so much I'm learning and diving deep into the minds of our RevOps leaders that I feel like I almost feel like I've become one of them over the last couple quarters, and I feel so much more capable of speaking to them, selling to them, and providing products and services that they really need, because I have put my heart and soul into understanding how they operate and what they think about.
Wow. When you do these meetings, is it always one-on-one with them, or is it group settings, or?
I try to make it one-on-one. If it's a group setting in like a dinner, I will make a point to move around the table and I will say, hey, I want to make sure, and I'll state to everybody, I want to make sure I get one-on-one time with every one of you. And then I will make my way around the table and move and play musical chairs because I want to make sure that I have that precious one-on-one time. And I think right now, if anybody's really honest, what's moving business forward is that one-on-one committed time. That's how it's happening.
And when you have these meetings, are you somehow taking that information and returning it back to the company at large or the executive team?
Absolutely. And it's really fun because I've been able to share that in company meetings, in my messages, and then in our executive meetings. And I've been using the AI note takers and getting the information back to the team and to the product team And to the point where now I feel like when I get on the phone, I'm not just showing up as the CEO, but I'm showing up as a thought leader or somebody that can help be insightful and add value to the RevOps leader that I'm on the phone with.
You and I talked about this. I love this. I mean, I always talk about one of the most impactful things I ever did at Better Cloud was when I met with 100 people in 100 days, 100 customers in 100 days, one on one, like you're talking about. And it was so powerful, but I found it energizing and exhausting,
Yeah.
at the same time. And I think to what you said, like there's no shortcut actually to this. You have to make the time and the energy and really connect with that buyer and that customer. And I think people try shortcuts to this. Oh, we'll survey a bunch of people, we'll do a dinner, and I'll talk to 10 people at the dinner. Now I know the customer. It's it's impressive really when you take the time, and I'm sure for the team it it shows how much you, to the customer for sure, it shows how much you care, and to the team as well.
Yeah, and I would say that the time that I had, I would typically have a propensity to focus it on insular into the business, right? And to be focused on how I can be helpful to the organization as an operating CEO. And I think there's a propensity not to pause things and to do that, but it will make you so much sharper as a CEO and the value you add to your leadership team, to your company. Because like you said, you're now insightful. You're now an expert on what your customer needs instead of guessing or flying blind. I think it takes a lot of arrogance to, as a CEO, not to take the time to deeply understand those customers. You're really flying by the seat of your pants if you don't really understand them.
How did the customers respond when you asked them for this time, or these RevOps leaders? How did they respond?
You know what was interesting is I think at first they're wondering why was I wanting the time, and honestly, did I want something? And this is a big deal to me. I think there's a propensity in business right now for people to be impatient and to ask for too much too soon. And I once heard that if in new relationships, if you just give for the first year, it's so transformational for the long-term relationship. And so when I get on the phone, I'm trying to figure out how do I help their career? How do I, and I'm sending them all swag. I'm trying to figure out what can I do to add value to their lives and to them, and showing that I truly want to understand their job and I care. It's made a huge difference versus I think some CEOs, and this is really when a CRO gets involved with customers too soon, a lot of times they're asking too much and they're running the relationship thin. And so I've made a concentrated effort to give back to them and to show them that I'm not on the line. I think people are almost coming leery when a leader asks for a call like that, like, oh, what are they going to ask me for?
Let's talk a little bit. I think it's important context to the rest of the conversation. With Fullcast, you didn't start the company. You're not the founder. You are the CEO. You're the chairman. How did that come to be?
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to get back in and run another company, but I didn't want to start at zero. And you and I both know 0 to 2 million, it's treacherous. It's hard. It's a really difficult phase. And I thought if I can skip that step, myself and my founders will write the check to make that happen. And I knew I wanted to be in RevOps. You know how there's the moments in your career that if you look back, they're kind of like flagship moments. One was for me in 2005. It was actually in Sugar CRM. I was working with developer Shelly Warren, and her and I were building these really cool, like we were building chatbots, we were building forecasting tools, we were building dialers before all these companies existed. And I was geeking out on the operational side of go to market back then. Fast forward to 2008, I'm at Task, which became rebranded as Workfront and is now an Adobe company. I was there and I got to spend the day at Salesforce with their leadership because of OpenView Ventures. blew my mind. I remember just thinking, this is like what we can do with the future of CRM and where it could go is incredible. So those moments shaped the space I looked into, because I think it's really, really important as a CEO. We talk about the values have to align with us. Like, we really have to believe them in our hearts, and it has to be a part of us. I also think the company we run, it has to be something we're really excited about. And I think sometimes CEOs convince themselves that they're excited and they're not, and everyone knows it. And so I knew that if I got in, besides looking at the total addressable market and the opportunity, I had to be a part of a company that I was excited about the problem we were solving. So we started looking in RevOps. And as we got more and more down that road, what we saw is a lot of the software is focused on the sales leader and the sales rep. And what made Fullcast really unique is it's focused on the RevOps leader, and then the sales leader and the AEs are secondary.
Hmm.
But it's the platform for the RevOps leader. And that differentiation, I knew we had to have that to scale. I also love that we were competing with the likes of an Exactly and an Anaplan. And I was like, okay, they're 20 years old. It's ripe for disruption. We have lightweight SaaS. Let's go after it. They validated the TAM. We know we like the differentiation. Now let's go build a public company.
How long did it take you to find the right company?
Man, it was 18 months. I was looking and talking to VCs and sending emails, and it was really difficult to find a company because I was looking at it through the lens of not just like a venture capitalist that's concerned about investing other people's capital, because that was going to happen with my founders and other investors, but my own capital and a really large check from me personally. And that meant a lot. And I knew I would be looking at my spouse, having a really serious conversation about the check. And so I took it really serious, and it took a long time until I felt a deep conviction. We just didn't go forward. We actually got close with a few companies, and I just ultimately couldn't get there.
And it's not just your money. I mean, it's your time, which at this point you're all in at this point again.
Yes.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about team, because now you've done this multiple times and you've been, successful multiple times, and how do you go put together a team to do something like this? I mean, it is a little bit of a different approach. You didn't start it, you didn't get brought in as CEO by the investors or something like that. How did you put together the team that you wanted to do this with?
I think one of the biggest unfair advantages a experienced operator or entrepreneur has is we have a network of people that we know have come through for us time and time again. And I would recommend to any entrepreneur, I have a spreadsheet I meticulously keep with all the people I've met throughout my life that stand out to me, that I would like to work with. And I knew exactly who I was going to call and when. And I can tell you, as we grow the business at the different stages, getting people involved, I have an idea of who those people are. And so I think you really have to be thinking about that if you're going to excel as a CEO or an operator. You have to have those long-term relationships. So I knew, and I knew the first three that would be my co-founders. I knew exactly who they were, and knowing my own weaknesses and strengths, I knew how they could help me build the business long term. One thing that was different about this is I would say all three of my co-founders are fully capable of being CEOs. They're capable of operating their own entities. And fascinatingly enough, every one of them raised more than 2 million in our round personally. And I allocated it to them and said, raise this. They all could raise their own seed rounds and operate their own businesses. And that's when I knew, I'm like, this is a different kind of team. This is a team where they could all do my job. They can all raise their own money and capital. I mean, you think about that. how often could you think that you had three other people on your leadership team that could raise the money for you?
Is that hard to get people who, how do you convince people who could go be CEOs to join you?
Yeah, there was only one way, and it was actually interesting. Amy, my CMO and one of my co-founders, she got an offer from a much larger software company, and it was north of $1 million offer. And the CEO said, "Is Ryan the greatest salesperson on earth?" And my reply was, "It was just that we deliver. For 10 years, I've worked with her, and I've kept my word. If I said, hey, we're going to do this or we're going to make this much, every time it's happened." And so what I would say is, don't worry about selling, worry about delivering, and the people will come, and your talent level will just continue to rise. To the entrepreneurs that are overselling people, you're not playing the long game. Make sure that you're giving the right expectations and you're exceeding them. And I love, there were some people that I wrote personal checks to after our exit. And there was actually Dan Kevin's to Kent Madsen, when there was at the end of our exit to Infosys, there was two people that had not vested that had an outsized impact, and we fought to get all of their stock vested so we could exceed expectations. And so it hasn't been really difficult to recruit them, only because we have delivered together as a team, and the outcomes have always been better than they expected when we started.
Well, I think also there is something about working with people that you trust and that you've done it with before. We did this exercise, I remember, with my leadership team with a third party moderator, and he said, everyone close your eyes, think about the best team you've ever been on, and then think about why that's the best team you've ever been on. And pretty much everyone immediately went to a sports team that they were on, basketball team or this or whatever. And he said, what's the number one reason? And he started writing on two sides of the whiteboard, and it was, trust, respect. I mean, people, and this was a blind kind of exercise. And at the end he said, did not a single person actually said skills. We had the best shooters, we had the best. And it was so, that was for me a very, even though you kind of know that innately, when you go through that exercise, and I think about like literally the best teams, what I think is we knew the other one had our back, we trusted them, we knew that we worked well together, and I feel like in business it's the same thing, where in a lot of, I mean, the skills are of course really important, but arguably if you trust each other and you know that you're going to be there for each other, you start to move in a way that I think is special.
It is special because you can operate independently of each other and know what each other's going to do and move at a pace that you were never able to move at before, because you've already made all these mistakes in prior ventures.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is the pace much faster?
I mean, I would say things we were doing in year 4 at Simplus, we're doing in our third quarter together. It's the trajectory is pretty. I think it'd be interesting to study from a venture capital perspective of just teams that have been together. Because the thing about my three founders is we've all operated together for at least 10 years. So that's the other thing is we have a lot of time built up, a lot of reps. And then I would say that the biggest thing that I get from it, interestingly, is when I get winded or when I'm tired, it's almost like you pass the baton and we're on the next leg and we're on that relay race. It's wild. We can grow, we can run so much faster because we spell each other out. It's very different than in my prior ventures. You also have to be more generous with the economics and the attention. That's where founders get so held back, is they're so bent on being the founder, or they want the economics to all go their direction. And the only way this model works is when they have big upsides. You find that late nights, early mornings, you're not alone anymore. You've got like this robust team that's ready to run with you.
I think that point is so important. I've had a number of conversations with founders that I am working with, advising, investing in, who always ask me, why does this person not care as much as I do? Why are they not, up in the middle of the night doing this deck? And it's hard to explain. Like, they're not the founders. They don't. You pay them a salary. They have equity that it's good, but it's not going to be game changing for that person. And if they're not sharing in those economics, I mean, that's how people are going to turn down $1 million offers, because they know that there's much bigger opportunity, and they'll grind for that because they're in it with you.
That's right. But you have to be really generous with the economic impact. It has to be a big upside at the end with those people. But I really think the next generation of great startups, if people, even if venture capitalists look at founders and how many years they've been together, I think that would be a great predictor of success. So because if you think about it, if you just met them, right, there's a lot of risk to what could go wrong. And do you work well together? Does it work? We don't know. But I think that if they have over 5 years working together and they've had a kind of prior exits and success, I got to believe the probability of success is dramatically higher. And I would pay up too, because the probability of success would be so much greater.
So let's talk about, one of the things I think you sound pretty adept at is around fundraising and how to find the right investors, how to structure equity, all of those things. I think at one point we were talking, you said, you enjoy reading reading a term sheet is fun, is fun for you, which I don't think anyone's ever said that to me before. Can you talk a little bit about what your opinions are on how to structure a company the right way from a cap table perspective, the good, the bad? Just give me a little bit of that, because we haven't actually talked about this on this podcast yet, and I think it's actually a pretty critical thing, especially when you're early, because it has so much knock-on effect down the road.
Yeah, so well said. So I would say, to flip it on its head, you should look at your cap table as a tool or a strategy to build the business. So most people don't realize the power in their cap table. I see many founders that aren't in communication with investors, and they're not keeping them up to date. They're not realizing that getting them as excited as customers and employees are important, and they're not keeping up the relationship with those investors. And they're also not realizing all the different types of investors out there and the types of money to raise. We'll talk about the difference between venture capital and private equity or angel investors, but then the real breakdown is actually within those verticals. So if you have a corporate VC that's investing, that's different than an independent VC. Or who is their anchor LP? Is it one big bank, or is it a series of small angel investors with boat payments? You have to understand the details behind and interview the venture capitalist if you want to understand how they're going to behave in the boardroom. And you have to be very thoughtful about the construct of your board, who's involved, when they're involved, the number of seats, and who the board member is and how long you've known the board member. Entrepreneurs are way too flippant about it. They're celebrating in rounds. I will literally look at the round, the fund docs. I'll be an angel investor, and I'll think, oh, Series B, they're likely going to be replaced. And it's highly unlikely that if they aren't replaced, that they're not very uncomfortable in their job. And they're thinking, how do I either exit, or I'm not having fun anymore? And I'll literally read the docs and feel kind of like, while everyone's celebrating, I'll kind of feel bad.
I have so many questions about this. The best founders that you've seen, in terms of, I love what you said about keeping investors as excited, like getting them excited like you would customers or partners or employees. The best founders that you've seen who do that, how do they do that?
So I think one is making sure that they understand your product or service. You'd be amazed how many investors, especially in the early stages, they may know you well and they may be betting on you, but insist that they understand what you do and offer opportunities for them to see new product updates or demos, right? So we actually sent an email out just a month or so ago inviting investors to come join for a demo to get to understand the new updates at Fullcast. They get forgotten about a lot, and you don't realize there's a lot of power to harness there. They're shareholders. They put hard-earned money in. They want a reason to root for you. You got to give it to them.
Earlier in my career, I viewed investors, let's say, as more of a burden, if I'm honest, than than what you're talking about, and it can be time consuming to do what you're talking about. Do you do it once a week, month, quarter? How do you make? Because I think I got advice from someone similar to you, a lot of experience with a lot of companies, and he said, "Dave, I'm giving you a strong recommendation to be in constant update with the investors on a regular cadence." And I was like, "Man, this is so much work and so much time," but it does pay off in multitude of ways. Down board meetings are better, they're working for their fundraising is easier. But how often do you do it, and do you always do it? Does the CFO do it? How do you handle that?
Great questions. I think it's different for every company, but one thing that I would say is if you're going to do a live demo or you're going to demo or do a webinar, loop them into it.
Something you're already doing.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times we're like, we have to create a new cycle. Just loop them into the flow of the business and include them, and they may hop on. And if anything, it makes it look like your webinar is more well attended anyway to your prospects. But at the same time, you get to sell to your investors and help them see what it is you're doing and get them more excited. The other thing is, and I'm only 2 quarters in, so I've been trying to get my bearings at Fullcast, but my rhythm at Simplus was I would have our financials come out from our CFO, and I would actually have our CFO do a call with everyone without me, where they could ask any question they wanted with our CFO and go through kind of intimate financial details. And that would be a week before the board meeting. So then when we got on the board call, they had a whole week to answer all those kind of in the weeds financial questions. And our board meetings became far more strategic because they were really up to date, and it was a even deeper financial deck than the board deck. So then the board deck allowed me to talk about, we were really inquisitive at Simplus. We did 8 acquisitions. So I was talking about opportunities, markets. I was having bankers. I was having other CEOs. I was having experts come into our board meetings and deliver big value. And it was transformational. We only had the time to do that because we were doing all the small things to keep them informed. So the board meeting wasn't like a surprise meeting with a bunch of deep dives into financial metrics that nobody had seen before. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize is you show up to the board meeting and don't realize that it was your preparation and communication beforehand that created the situation.
You basically do all the tactical, let's say, more in the weeds questions, so then the board meeting is actually a strategic conversation.
Yeah, because I want them to get the metrics and the rigor of operating a business is important. And I want them to cover that. But in that meeting where you have these strategic thinkers, and if you have the right board of individuals that have already been where you want to go, you want that precious time to be discussing how you're going to make moves in the market. And I think it'll make you a much better CEO if you have that time.
When you think about, you know, this business, and when I look at Fullcast, it seems like I mean, to be frank, pretty full featured product. I mean, there's a lot. How much are you involved on the product side of the business? How in the weeds are you? How do you determine where to make those investments? I know you're only a couple, 2, 3 quarters in, but it does feel like a pretty big you're really building the RevOps platform from what I can see. And that's a big undertaking. So how do you think about product development and prioritization, let's say?
So a couple things that are interesting. One, I was up till 1 a.m. last night. I read every G2 review. And then I sent a LinkedIn request to every one of them. And then I sent a personal message to every one of them and said, okay, what did you mean by this or this? As the CEO, I want to understand everything I can from you about your experience in the product. I sent a message, did not go to bed until I had messaged every one of them with either in mail or connected to them. And I dived deep and read every detail on those G2 reviews. So I try to stay fresh on what do they want. I've interviewed every one of our customers, and then I've been interviewing leaders in the RevOps community. And we brought together an advisory board of just experts in RevOps. So we have the head of RevOps for Citrix or Domo or Entrada or um, Cloudflare, whatever it is. We've had them join, and then I have a quarterly 2-hour call independent of the board meeting where they're reviewing the roadmap, and then they're looking at where our prioritization. And I want to do ruthless prioritization with them. Is this right now going to deliver value for you? So we're definitely putting this in front of experts in the space.
So you ask them to stack rank. You actually go to those people and ask them to stack rank the capabilities.
That's right. Because I don't want to spend 1 minute in a cycle that's not delivering ultimate value to our customer. So instead of me trying to interpret that and even though our product leader, Bala, and our founder, he was the RevOps leader at Salesforce, even though he has a really good understanding, he's also has a really great mix of humility. And so he's out there and really listening in that meeting, and he's the one presenting. And I am just, it's nice as a CEO because I'm just taking it in, trying to make sure we're on the right track.
I have made this mistake and been pretty public about it of having a very broad ideal customer profile, ideal buyer persona. We haven't talked about this, but I think from what you're saying, you it sounds like the names you're talking about, there's a pretty narrow scope. Is that a true statement? Like, are you pretty narrow on those things?
We were really tight on our ICP, and it's really narrow, both on employee count, industry, all of that. We're tied down and we're focused there. One of the nice things about having the historical data, the previous founders, they actually had some investors push them to build a product for kind of the smaller size businesses, and the churn was outrageous. And if you think about the strategy with RevOps of equitable territories, getting capacity right, a lot of those things are done in spreadsheets for 5 reps. The strategy and being able to really operationalize it comes at least 50 reps. So it has impacted all of our metrics, focusing on the right ICP.
Someone comes to you outside of that ICP, or a rep is, prospecting outside that ICP. Is that something that you're how tight do you keep that?
It is a hard no. There's no, we're not loose on that. If it's under 500 employees and under 50 reps, it's just a no. We've had one case where the leader was at Amazon and really understood, and there were 400 employees and understood exactly the value and was a former customer. But outside of that, we've in a startup, I cannot stress how many founders maybe don't realize how precious the resources of time are. And anytime we let and we're not explicit with direction about where we're headed and why, if you even let weeks go by, you're losing opportunity that is precious and could become a problem when it comes time to raise again.
I think this is the number one mistake, in my opinion, I've made, and that I think that I see first time founders making, is they feel like the ICP needs to be as big as possible versus as narrow as possible. And then they end up great product for a 200 person company, and then they get a 50,000 person company coming to them and they're like, 50,000 people, that's the deal that's going to make the company now for the next 2 years. We're going to essentially build a roadmap to hope to close that 50,000 and stop acquiring all the 200. I have seen that. I honestly, I would say a dozen times in the last 6 months where, and it's exactly this. And I think it's only the people who've done it multiple times actually, when you speak to them, they're like, no, that's tighter is better.
Yeah, it takes discipline and it's counterintuitive and it's really hard. And the other thing is you raise a bunch of dollars and you can be subject to this complacency of saying, I got a ton of money. I can pursue all this. Mentally, we're also a little more, I think founders in general are going to be a little bit more positive. And so we're going to believe that it's all obtainable and you have to look at it more like a finite resource. And the other thing is you have to understand you can get it later. You can expand. And I actually think some of those habits start in college where everybody's always hitting on your total addressable market. They're constantly, and venture capitalists are always talking about total addressable market. And what I've found is you can grow your TAM as long as you have a niche that you're delivering for. The TAM can expand as you have more resources and revenue. It's not like you have one opportunity in the beginning to go after the big TAM. You can always grow to that TAM, but I think if you stay directed and disciplined, you're more likely to succeed.
I don't usually go into specific parts of the product and everything, but AI seems like a just a cornerstone of what you're doing, obviously. Can you talk about that and how, because for me, as I look at a bunch of companies, I see a lot of AI, let's say, feature products. They're not really like they're not core to the product. They're not really a platform. It's really a feature that should be part of something. How have you thought about, was AI built in from day one? Was that a big part of the decision making process? Like, I just want to understand your thought process there.
Yeah, credit to our visionary co-founder, Bala. He was working on this long before we got involved, and so we're not, putting makeup on a pig and marketing it. We have some pretty incredible products around AI, and I'll go through three of them. One is our Copilot. So once you set up your territories, one of the big complexities and difficulties with the spreadsheet is a RevOps team will build the territories in a spreadsheet. They'll walk away. And for the year, you have all these accounts that change. You have reps that quit, they resign. You have reps that get promoted, and it's a mess. And you have this static spreadsheet from the beginning of the year. Nothing is still the same or very little. Now you got to go back and export, figure it out, do the exercise over again. Instead, with Fullcast, you have it managed with Copilot. Our AI Copilot automatically will update your territories as things are changing in real time. So now you say, okay, this rep quit. Boom, we'll make the change based on the rules engine that was already set. So now no one's thinking, was there quota leakage? Did we miss this opportunity? Did somebody not capitalize on it? It's just happening. So that's one way we're using AI. The second is we've created this bot that is helping our customers learn the platform. So we've created an AI bot that will educate, and it's condensing the time it takes to implement Fullcast and helps them get up to speed on the platform. The other one is anywhere that we're with our new capacity planning, we've created some really cool things that make it so that you can look at different scenarios. And then with our smart plans AI, you can actually say, here are the variables, tell me how to do the territories. And with AI, we can do the thinking for you and say, here's the optimal territories. That's a game changer. And that's where we're flipping things in a whole different way with AI.
Let's go the other direction. Tell me the biggest challenge you've had at Fullcast, which has been a short time, or in general, in your career, and what was that challenge, and how did you overcome that, if you did?
Yeah, so the founders were really focused on the product and had built a pretty incredible product, but they had run through the venture capital. They were tighter in cash, and they were strapped for resources, and they did not have the sales and marketing kind of firepower. So when we came in, there was no pipeline. And so it was like day one, we had to build the pipeline to get the business. Now we just had a record quarter and it was an incredible result this last quarter. But we were pretty like we came in, we were so stoked. We were like, okay, we raised the money. We're here. And then everyone's like, okay, wait a minute. There's no pipeline. So immediately it was a fire drill to generate the pipeline necessary. We added 8 million in pipeline in the 2 quarters. And then we were like, okay, now we're in business. And I still think we're probably halfway where we need to be. We'll exceed 100% year over year growth. And I would expect us to continue to keep that pace. So we're going to have to generate a lot more pipe. But that was kind of like, and to be honest with you, I was not in CEO shape. So like I got in and I felt like mentally and emotionally and time-wise, I was in a pretty, cushy position where I was chairing a few boards and that was, 10 or 20 hours a quarter. And so all of a sudden it was like, no, you're not just CEO, you're a startup CEO. You have to be kind of a maniac. And it's taken me 6 months to ramp up. So I'd say those two things, one, the pipeline, and two, I had to mentally shift and get back in shape and get the habits back in place to be the productive CEO that the company needed me to be.
That CEO shape is a really that's an important call out. A lot of the people I talk to from the post exit founder group and from all the that they all, it's whenever anyone goes back into it, as much as you imagine yourself in good CEO shape and you can do the long days and you can do back to back to back to back all day, that's one of the number one things I hear from people as they get back into it, is to get back in CEO shape. No one's actually used that term, but I can feel that and understand that, because you get used to just a completely different pace.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, the one thing that I underestimated is you're making hundreds of small decisions, especially at the early stage. Now, when I was operating at the end towards Simplus, I was probably making 4 or 5 big decisions that would change or impact the trajectory of the company annually. Now you're making that many every day, at least. And so you get thrown in and you get decision fatigue. You're not used to working that many hours. You realize you're a little bit older and you're like, okay, I got to be physically in shape. And so then I start looking at everything. How am I doing physically? How am I doing mentally? How have I balanced? Am I meditating? When I unplug, what do I do? What are my things that I enjoy that disconnect me from day to day? And I have to kind of calibrate my life and figure out. And I think CEOs look at like my day as a CEO, and then they look at my day with, family or physical or emotional health separately. And I think we need to get to the place where we just see it as one thing. And how do we get in shape, CEO shape, for all those things and help our executives do the same?
Last question about Fullcast, and I want to talk more about your background. What are you most excited about for the future, for the next year, for the next couple of years at Fullcast?
Well, one of the big things is I want to build an incredible RevOps community. I want to build a place where they get heard, a place where they're not just unsung heroes, but they're getting recognized. I want to build, and we really have aspirations to build the go-to-market platform for the RevOps leader. And so over the next couple of years, I would love to see a community, much like Gainsight and Pulse for Fullcast around RevOps. That's a new role and they need a community. We want to deliver that community for them. And I would expect to see, Fullcast, someday ring the bell. I mean, that's our aspiration. And that's what gets me up and excited. That's the thing that I haven't done.
Hmm.
And, you look at all the various things you want to accomplish and check those boxes. That's one I want to do. And I want to create a lot more wealth among my team and my employees, very focused on how we share the cap table and create more value in other people's lives.
I love that. Um, all right, let's talk about your background. Where are you from originally?
So I grew up in a combination between Provo, Utah and Philadelphia. So here's what's wild. So in Philadelphia, we were right outside the city. My dad was attending the University of Pennsylvania, and I was listening to LL Cool J. Mama's gonna knock you out. Pop goes the weasel, and the weasel goes pop. I was breakdancing. I was hanging out with my friends, and I was having a great time. And it was a very different, culture altogether. You move to Provo, Utah, and they didn't have, I moved back in 92, and they didn't have a hip hop radio station for 7 more years. So in 1999 was the first time you could listen to hip hop in Utah.
Wow.
So I'm humming songs and people are looking at me like, what is that? People are listening to country music and soft rock and, kind of old school rock and roll. And here I am humming these songs. In 99, suddenly I'm the prophet because the songs are finally real. Everybody sees what I'm talking about and they start enjoying the music. But I felt like a stark, just cultural shock in the system of those moves. But what it did for me is it helped me figure out how to recalibrate and start over and be kind of an underdog and make things work, and how to work in lots of environments. I was in very different friend groups in very different cultures, very different places, and I had to adapt. And I look back on that aspect of my childhood, and I don't think I would be where I've been able to be had it not been for some of those big changes in my life.
And why make that move to Provo?
So my dad, my mom and dad are originally from Provo, and my dad went to attend the University of Pennsylvania for a master's program, and so we moved out there with the expectation we would eventually come back to Provo. But I had culturally become so part of Philadelphia and the scene there that just about everything I was talking about, my language, the way I spoke and thought, and everything was like I just as well been an alien dropped into 1992 in Provo. It was I can't even describe to you. I would have just flat out been in a different country, and so yeah. But it was a good experience that I had to adapt to.
And where are you now? Where do you live now?
I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I consider this my blend between Provo and Philadelphia. So I love it here because it has both worlds and I'm comfortable in both worlds. And I love being in Salt Lake. It's a beautiful place. I'm 10 minutes from being able to be on a trail in the mountains. I'm 10 minutes from being downtown, 15 minutes from the airport, 20 minutes from Park City and the slopes. I mean, it's very easy to get around and it's a nice mid-major city. So I really like living here in Salt Lake.
And you're a big champion of the tech scene there.
Big time.
Yeah, big. And everything I read, like you really promote it, and it's been, from what I gather, I've already interviewed a couple people from the Utah tech scene. It's been really successful. There's been a lot of big wins there, and many more to come. Why do you think that's the case there?
There's a few very different things about Utah. One is you have many people serving missions because of the religious aspect of Utah. And when you, like me, get sent to Florida at 19 and you're wearing a long sleeve shirt and a suit and riding a bike in 100 degrees with 100% humidity with people that have lived their faith, most of them for 50 or 60 years. You're 19 years old. Imagine how the conversation goes. And imagine how many doors you knock on as a 19-year-old. And imagine trying to convince someone to live an entirely new lifestyle. Now imagine yourself as an entrepreneur. How much easier does it sound? That is fundamentally why I think you have so many successful entrepreneurs that come out of Utah, because you go to a place where you have to push through mentally really difficult stuff. You get to a place where you become unselfish because you spend all of your time looking for ways to help people, and you don't have any other focus in your life. And so I think it matures people quicker. So they get an earlier start, is one thing. The second is I always felt like if I could do that, I actually remember being in a Wendy's eating, watching two salesmen come into a Wendy's with some goofy toys, selling them to the Wendy's employees and thinking, that is the easiest thing I've ever seen in my life. Why couldn't I do something like that? I was on my mission and I remember, I mean, these guys were going door to door and I felt a sense of that looks so easy. That's how my mindset was. So then you wonder when these entrepreneurs are coming out of Utah, they have a different mindset. When they're younger, they get a start and they have a mindset that sets their trajectory that's a little different. And we have more women now serving missions than men. So now you have a lot of women that are on that same kind of trajectory. Then you have a bunch of colleges and you have the youngest population in the United States. So it's you kind of feel an energy when you come to Salt Lake. People are going for their dreams. You go to some areas and it's very relaxed and laid back. Salt Lake is not laid back. People want to succeed in Salt Lake.
When you think about your career in general, has there been someone, did you have a mentor or an advisor or board, some person that you like that was instrumental in your success or your evolution?
Yeah, I would say a full committee of people because the true answer is at different stages, different people had big impacts on my life. Don't you think that's how it is? So if you look back, I think like early in my career, it's just evolved to maybe 5 or 6 different people throughout. One person in the last few years that I would call in situations where I was trying to solve a difficult problem is Jeremy Andrus, the CEO of Traeger Grills. Um, he's extremely smart, but more than that, he really has been an operator a long time and he's put a lot of thought and he's as passionate as I am about the process of building great companies. He built Skull Candy and then built Traeger, both public companies. He's an excellent operator. And before that, when we were building Simplus, David Northington of Cloud Sherpa, he gave me some solids that were saved me. I think we saved years on our trajectory because of some of these mentors and some of these people. I cannot say enough. It's so important that as an entrepreneur, we're humble enough to not be the entrepreneur that has great stories about going through dark forests and figuring it out. I think we stop with that and we just find out who's done it and we listen. You're great at that. I've seen you listen really well and you ask a lot of questions of other entrepreneurs and you're really curious. And I think that's what makes you a great entrepreneur. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs lose precious years because they don't ask enough questions to the people that have been there before them.
I think the most important thing I thank you for that, and I think the most important thing you said there for people to hear is this committee, and you've always had someone, maybe a different person at different stages, but you've always had that person or a group of people that you could call on. And I think that that's important because I think a lot of people feel like, oh, just in the early stage, I'll get that advisor to help me, but then I'll know how to do it all. And it's the reality is, you each stage is a different set of challenges and you want the person who's seen around that corner, who's been there. And I think that's really important, that even for you at the stage that you're at and the experience that you have, you still are calling on people who have seen the next stage to get help.
Yeah, and I think you have to be thoughtful about figuring out who's ahead of you and figuring out how you get in contact with them. And that needs to be a strategy as you're a CEO that you take the time to thoughtfully figure out. And it goes back to what I said before, like with Jeremy, when I first met him, I interviewed him for Forbes years ago, wrote an article about him. I found out that he loved BYU football. So I found some classic BYU, different like swag and things signed by players and provided him. I spent thousands of dollars sending him things and I was committed to providing value to him because I knew that he could help me on that next stage. So that's the other thing, is provide them value, don't ask for anything, and try to add value for a year and just keep delivering more value to them. And then long term, it's amazing the relationship you can create and the benefit that it will create in your life.
You talked before about you want to go public at some point, ring the bell, some you haven't done before. What is it that motivates you even deeper? You talked about building wealth. Like, is there something else that motivate, like deep down to your core? You've been doing this for a long time with a lot of companies. With you don't need to do it anymore. Is what I guess what is the driving factor behind all of this? Like, why achieve that? Why what drives you?
Major shift in my life about 10 years ago. And one thing I realized is I love winning with a team, and the process of creating a great team that is world class, building a beautiful business. That process I love. Seeing other people. When I look back on Simplus, it wasn't when I received a deposit on the exit. It was when someone called me in tears who said, "Hey, I paid off my kids' college and we got we paid off all of our 401ks, and I'm a first generation kind of college student, and this changed my life." I mean, I have literally rehearsed in my mind those calls. And so for me, that I'll play that call in my mind when I need to get that fire, because I know I'm playing for that person. And there's a lot of people that are going to come to Fullcast that their lives are going to change. And I hope it's thousands of people that are able to come, and the trajectory of their life. There was a couple people I remember who started with Simplus. I remember detailed stories where they're like, I just got divorced. I was down on my luck. I didn't know where I was going to go career wise. And now I'm remarried. I'm a millionaire. I've never felt better. I mean, it's like cheating and living life when you can create something from nothing and share it. The one thing I would say to entrepreneurs is you're missing out on the best part of entrepreneurship if you're not sharing the economics. That the satisfaction that comes with that is incredible. And there's only so much you can do economically, personally. There comes a point where,
Right.
what are you going to do? Like that, you run out of socks on Amazon. You have a nice house. You can take a warm bath. You have any clothes you want. The vehicle you use for transportation is great. It's a certain point where you have to ask yourself, how much more do you need before you can share the economics with other people? And so that's, for me, that satisfaction of seeing people's lives change. I'm really bought into that. I also want to win with my team, and I am a competitor. So I get my juices flowing pretty easily when I start looking at competitors. It's something since I was a little kid. I had to actually train myself to back off as a kid in sports because I didn't want to ruin all my friendships. I mean, it was a big blind spot. I was like, man, I go too hard. I see scenes with people like a Kobe or a Jordan, and I see how they get really,
Mhm.
they lose themselves in it. I have that ability. So I have to step myself back, and with maturity, it's gone inward, and I just feel it on the inside, and it's like, okay, check. It's motivation. Now we're going to manifest it in the right way.
Mm.
The younger me was letting that intensity come out outwardly too much.
That's the drive, right? That at the end of the day, that's really deep down. That's what's driving. you know.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like I'll see something online, a G2 review, a LinkedIn post from a competitor, and that will be enough to send me up until 3 a.m. and I can't stop. So that's the truth behind the scenes. And I think some people are like, what do you have to be like to be a successful entrepreneur? You have to be like that. You have to be a bit obsessive, and you have to be very tenacious, and you have to be very, very driven. Otherwise, you'll give up on the dream. There's way too many reasons to give up.
Last question for you: if you could go back to the beginning of your career, knowing everything you know today, and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
It's your direction that's most important, not your speed. I always, I'm focused on speed. But if I would have slowed down and focused on direction, like some of the things we talked about, which was the ICP, the differentiation, getting the delivery right to the customer, whether it's a product or service, slowing down and making sure that I'm pointed in the right direction, I would just charge forward and believe that it would work out. And I believe now I'm more surgical and methodical, and then I don't waste any time or effort. And it's almost like when you look at LeBron right now, later in his career, it's like he might not be as athletic, but he knows exactly his basketball IQ is off the charts. I hope that that's what I can do. Is my IQ from an entrepreneurial perspective continues to increase, and I'm able to do more with less. But that's what because I'll tell you, I got into some serious problems with cash flow and things early in my career because I didn't realize that you actually have to manage growth. I grew faster, even though we were profitable. Cash flows went upside down because we weren't collecting as fast as we were spending. And I didn't understand that. And so in my 20s, I went through all these painful cash crunches and almost going out of business because I was not slowing down and being strategic.
Ryan, before we close up, where can people connect with you? What's the best platform to connect with you? Where can they find out more about Fullcast?
Definitely on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn and fullcast.com. Excited to engage with all of you. Please message me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Ryan, thank you. This was a lot that we packed into an hour and a lot of lessons. And to be honest, you kind of have me fired up and ready to go again. So this has been awesome. Thank you for making the time to talk to me.
Thank you. Incredible interview. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, for everyone listening, hope you enjoyed. And there really is so much to learn from this conversation. And I urge you to connect with Ryan. He's probably more busy than he used to be, but I'm sure he'll respond to you. And thank you so much. And until the next episode of Not Another CEO Podcast, thank you very much. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.